Tonight,
welcome to Tallahassee.
Thank you. From Florida with faith.
Our household is a Christ-centered household.
Florida Governor and presidential candidate Ron DeSantis explores new territory with CBN News.
Where is your heart with respect to God, and what is that relationship?
Plus, fleeing Haiti.
When the police come, we just have to run away.
Haitian migrants seeking a better life next door become victims. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A presidential candidate's faith at the forefront. Good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, an exclusive CBN News interview. Florida Governor and Republican presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis is opening up about his personal faith and why he thinks evangelical voters should choose him as the party's nominee in 2024. CBN News chief political analyst David Brody sat down with DeSantis at the governor's residence in Tallahassee.
Welcome to Tallahassee. Thank you.
Conservatives see Ron DeSantis as a no-nonsense crusader fighting the liberal agenda as Florida governor.
I don't think there's any elected official in the country who's not only stood up for the values that we all share, but has actually beat the left back on these things.
And in our interview, we explored new territory, a more personal look at the man who wants to be the next president.
Who are you at your core? What is your DNA all about?
So I'm a working class kid. I mean, my mom's from Youngstown, Ohio. My dad's from Western Pennsylvania. I think that they were very, very clear about what I needed to be doing for my obligations. You know, do well in school, you know, make sure you're in church every Sunday, make sure you're working around the house. You're not going to get anything handed to you.
A philosophy reinforced at a strict Catholic grade school he attended.
Did you like it? Did you, oh my gosh, I couldn't stand it? Or what was the experience like?
Well, I think by and large I liked it, but again, I think the things that I didn't like about it were because they were doing the right thing by making sure that we were disciplined and making sure that we were, you would pray every day. Some of the nuns were very strict about what your obligations were. And again, as a young kid, maybe not the most fun at the time, but I think was the right approach.
That discipline and hard work led to success as a baseball player in Little League, high school, and at Yale. Other shining accomplishments followed: Harvard Law, a Navy lawyer, serving in Iraq, becoming a U.S. congressman, and now governor.
I always believed that it doesn't matter where you start. You know, if you put that nose to the grindstone and work hard, God has a plan for you and you can do well in this country.
DeSantis credits his Catholic faith for keeping him grounded in truth. While he doesn't publicly tout his faith, he and his wife Casey attend church regularly and make it a family priority.
Our household is a Christ-centered household, and we're raising our kids, with those values. We think that that's very important. It's great for us when our kids are coming back from preschool or kindergarten talking about David and Goliath and talking about some of these, and we're like, thank you, So we're very, very appreciative of being able to do that. My son, he was 4 for Christmas this year. He wanted a sling to be like David slaying Goliath. And so that really, I think, warms our hearts when we see that.
Like King David, DeSantis had to lean on his faith and prayer during his wife's 2021 breast cancer diagnosis. After undergoing treatment, she's now cancer-free.
There was a definite increase in her spirits once we went public and people started praying for us. And you could, yes, absolutely.
The governor has faced tragedy as well. In 2015, his sister Christina died suddenly at just 30 years old.
She had a pulmonary embolism, so it's difficult just because you're just thinking why would that have to happen? And not that you want any illness, but it's sometimes people are going through it. This was something 5 days before it happened was not even on our radar.
Times like that can challenge anyone. For DeSantis, there's a scripture verse he keeps central to his life.
I would point out, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I mean, that's ultimately what the faith centers around. Yes, there's a lot of traditions, and I think a lot of those are nice, but at the end of the day, it's kind of, where is your heart with respect to God, and what is that relationship?
DeSantis hopes to build a strong relationship with voters, especially evangelicals in the early primary states of Iowa and South Carolina. Wins there could help put him on the path to the GOP nomination. He has plenty of policy wins on his resume, including a pro-life Florida heartbeat law. He's quick to point out how that distinguishes him from the former president, President Trump.
While I appreciate what the former president has done in a variety of realms, he opposes that bill. He said it was, quote, harsh to protect an unborn child when there's a detectable heartbeat. I think that's humane to do.
Do you feel the former president's going soft then on abortion a little bit, especially in this area that you mentioned?
Well, I think so. I mean, I was really surprised because he's a Florida resident, and I thought he would compliment the fact, that we were able to do the heartbeat bill, which pro-lifers have wanted for a long time. He never complimented, never said anything about it. Then he was asked about it, and he said it was, quote, harsh.
But DeSantis' message to evangelicals on how to turn this country around is much bigger than one issue.
It's got to be a spiritual, and I think it's got to be a strong faith that is really going to get us through very turbulent times.
So we need more God in society today.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, there's certain problems, economic problems, there's problems at the border, there's all very important, but why are we here? Why are we free people? We're free because God has endowed us with inalienable rights. That's why America was founded. Our Constitution was created not to give us rights, but to protect the rights that God has already bestowed upon us.
While DeSantis wants to spread that message today, looking back in history, he told us of another message that would have been great to witness.
Could I have been there with Jesus' disciples? I mean, these are people who, Peter's just fishing one day, and all of a sudden, this guy comes up to him, catches all the fish and says, you're going to be fisher. I want you to be a fisher of men. Come with me. And so these guys all went out and they dedicated their life to spreading the gospel. I look back at that and would love to have been able to be there with them.
Instead, he'll be spreading a 2024 campaign message of conservatism cloaked in faith.
Thank you.
David Brody, CBN News, at the Florida governor's residence in Tallahassee.
All right, thank you, David. Julia Manchester is a national politics reporter for The Hill, and she joins us now. Julia, welcome. Great to have you with us this Friday. To Ron DeSantis, he's been described as a little bit awkward on the campaign trail. We, of course, know he can be combative with reporters. Do you think he's starting to loosen up a little bit?
It's hard to say because I think the campaign trail, at least at the national level in states like Iowa and New Hampshire, is an unfamiliar place for Ron DeSantis. So I think we'll start to see him and, quite frankly, a lot of the other candidates get to be more comfortable in that space. On top of that, you often hear how Florida First Lady Casey DeSantis is sort of definitely an asset in that way, that she really gives that more warmer touch on the campaign trail. And she, like many spouses, oftentimes, gives a different view of the candidate running, in this case, Ron DeSantis. But this week, it's been hard to tell because besides the governor's interview with David, we haven't seen as much of the Florida governor this week. Of course, earlier this week, we saw that President Trump was indicted or arraigned in Miami for those federal charges related to the documents case, and he made it kind of a campaign stop in Miami, which happens to be a part of Ron DeSantis's home state. So I think you've been seeing the governor lay a bit lower than usual. But in that interview with David, I think you saw a more human side to him. You saw him talk about his faith, which he doesn't talk about a lot. We saw him talk about, his, personal matters, family matters, which he doesn't normally address in public. So I thought it was definitely a different side of him we saw in that interview with David.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned the arraignment of former President Trump, which has become a fundraising boon for his presidential campaign, pulling in $6.6 million. Julia, what do you make of that?
Look, I think President Trump has offered a political masterclass, quite frankly, in how to handle this. And I mean, it is unprecedented. And you would normally think that an indictment would be bad for any political candidate, let alone someone running for president of the United States. But he's turned this into a campaign event in a way. I mean, after he left the arraignment in Miami on Tuesday, he went to a very popular Cuban restaurant in Little Havana. Then he went back to Bedminster, met with donors, addressed support supporters. So he made this a campaign stop in a critical state in Florida's presidential primary, Florida. So, I think he's handled this in a way where it's helped him. And in a way, he sort of has the natural advantage because we're naturally going to be talking about President Trump. He gets this free media coverage. Is it maybe the most positive media coverage? No, but his base of supporters think this arraignment and think this indictment is unfair to the president, that there is a double standard. So it gives him the upper hand, and it sort of forces the other candidates in the race to respond in some way or stay quiet.
Yeah, it puts them in a bit of a rock and a hard place. To your point, most Republicans do still support Trump, and new polls, though, starting to suggest that this indictment might be hurting him just a little bit. Could Trump's legal problems, Julia, provide a pathway for someone like DeSantis?
It's quite possible. And I was talking to some strategists earlier this week who, kind of interestingly noted, look, this week, you haven't really heard President Trump go after Ron DeSantis. It seems to be a lull in that attack wave coming from the former president. So Ron DeSantis hasn't had to deal with attacks from Donald Trump. And instead, he's giving interviews such as with David, where he's in a way criticizing President Trump's stance on abortion and how he's handled abortion. So it's in a way, I think, the argument could be made that it's helping DeSantis. And I think that, on the other side of that, there's an argument that DeSantis can now portray himself as Trump without the baggage. DeSantis and Trump are, share a lot of policy and political similarities, but DeSantis doesn't have this legal baggage that Trump is having to deal with.
All right, Julia Manchester with The Hill. We'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend, Julia.
You too.
And coming up, global cyber attacks disrupt the private and public sector. Who's behind it? Next. You're watching. Guilty on all counts. That's the verdict from a federal jury convicting the gunman who killed 11 worshipers in a Pittsburgh synagogue. Robert Bowers, a 50-year-old truck driver, was found guilty of all 63 federal charges in the 2018 shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue. The penalty phase of the trial begins a week after the break, when the jury will decide if Bowers should serve life in prison or receive the death penalty. In addition to the 11 who died, 7 others were injured. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to China on a long-awaited trip to smooth the waters between the two countries, hopefully. And the high-stakes visit just got more complicated with word that hackers backed by the Chinese government have attacked computer networks worldwide. National security correspondent Caitlin Berg is following the developments. Caitlin, what do we know about the cyber attacks?
Jenna, according to Mandiant, a cyber intelligence arm of Google, the hack targeted tens of thousands of computers, about a third of them within government agencies. After Mandiant's initial investigation, they report the hackers were, quote, engaged in espionage activity in support of the People's Republic of China.
We are not really paying enough attention, I think, to the Chinese encroachment upon the West in terms of its cyber infiltration and ultimately exfiltration of data.
This latest effort targeted Barracuda Networks, a data protection service. Scott White, director of the cybersecurity program at George Washington University, sees China playing the long game. That includes stealing data from private citizens, corporations, and governments, with the overall goal being to eventually link the captured information.
It's only through artificial intelligence that we're going to be able to take millions and millions of pieces of data and begin to put together pieces and construct the puzzle. And that puzzle will be information for the Chinese to use not only against its own citizens, perhaps against our citizens as well.
The Barracuda breach began as a phishing email that eventually gained access to data in 16 different countries across the public and private sectors, including foreign ministries.
I don't see the Chinese stopping this. They're incredibly imperialistic right now. They don't seem to care what the West thinks. And they're engaging in these attacks quite frankly, at a very constant and increasingly rapid rate.
As news spreads of this latest cyber attack, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to China. The White House says the goal of the trip is to ease provocation and manage international competition before it turns into conflict.
China will continue to be around and a major player on the world stage as we are putting ourselves on that stronger footing to compete.
China isn't the only adversary pursuing data from the West. The Energy Department announcing this week a Russian ransomware group gained access to several federal agencies. Jen Easterly, director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, says the hackers do not appear to have focused on any high-value information, but that investigation is also ongoing. Jenna?
All right, national security correspondent Caitlin Berg, thank you. Well, a human trafficking haven. When we come back, how immigrants fleeing Haiti become victims next door. Welcome back. Pope Francis is back at the Vatican after surgery, and the papal surgeon says the head of the Catholic Church is, quote, better than before. The 86-year-old pontiff was discharged from a Rome hospital today after a 9-day stay for abdominal surgery to repair a hernia and remove painful scarring. When asked by reporters how he was doing, the Pope said jokingly that he was, quote, still alive. The State Department's annual Trafficking in Persons report, released this week, highlights U.S. commitment to ending human trafficking around the world.
Protecting victims, prosecuting traffickers, and preventing this crime by dismantling the systems that make it easier for traffickers to operate. Now, in its 23rd year, the report reflects the U.S. government's commitment to global leadership on this key human rights issue, law enforcement, and national security issue.
The U.S. is partnering with foreign governments and international non-government agencies to prevent, detect, and prosecute new forms of trafficking for the most vulnerable. The Caribbean island of Hispaniola is home to two nations, the Dominican Republic and Haiti. In 2022, more than 8 million people visited the Dominican Republic, making it the most popular tourist destination in the region. That influx contributed to a spike in sex trafficking in the country. Sadly, immigrants fleeing the desperate poverty in Haiti are some of the most vulnerable victims. CBN's Chuck Holton has the story.
The Dominican Republic has an immigration issue. Conditions in Haiti have led to an increase in border crossings, and today, Haitians make up 25% of the DR population. We drove to a remote border crossing to get a sense of the problem.
This barrier between Haiti and the Dominican Republic is something the Dominicans call their version of the Trump wall. It was put here starting in 2019 to keep this flood of Haitians from coming into their country because it's been so expensive for them. But it's an ongoing problem, and they have to have soldiers out here in order to guard this fence as well, because otherwise people will cut right through it or jump right over it.
Haitians live in Batays, the poorest slums. Many work on sugarcane farms, one of this tropical country's biggest industries. It's hot, hard, and low-paying.
When the police come, we just have to run away.
The government is rounding up and deporting Haitians without the proper documents. Last year, authorities sent a record 162,000 Haitians back to their country.
We have nowhere to turn when people take advantage of us, or even if someone robs us. Finding a job is very tough. We have to look after ourselves.
There are an estimated 2 million undocumented Haitians in the DR, but this issue is complicated.
This is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Santo Domingo and is completely full of Haitians. But as a matter of fact, many of the people that live here were born in the Dominican Republic. But because they're of Haitian descent, they can't automatically get citizenship in DR, and they don't have citizenship in Haiti either. And so they don't have papers for either country. And that leaves them in sort of a legal gray area that makes it very difficult for them to make a living.
Working under the table is often the only option, and many do so by serving the tourists who visit these white sand beaches each year. Unfortunately, foreign money combined with desperate poverty make the Dominican Republic a global hotspot for sex tourism, and over 20% of girls here are pregnant by age 18.
There's so many of these families put their young girls out into prostitution in order to just make a little bit of money because it's so difficult. And then the girls wind up getting pregnant. And so you got moms that are sometimes only 12 years old, 13, 14, and then they have an extra mouth to feed, so they kind of get kicked out.
Parakaleo Ministries is building this home for single moms right in the middle of the Batey, outside Santo Domingo.
To bring them in and try and help them have a safe place and also train them for some life skills, some, where they can get some work and so on too.
Pastor Simon oversees the program and leads the small church they started on the roof of this building.
Prostitution is a big problem in Dominican Republic. People like 12 years cross early, so we make this program for help them in this situation.
Fluent in Haitian, Spanish, and English, Pastor Simon does his best to help the members of this community better their lives without resorting to selling their bodies.
La Casa El Roy is a new program he has for the young people, especially the ladies, family education, and social education for them.
However, as long as tourists are willing to spend money in the Dominican Republic in search of forbidden fruit, it will remain an uphill battle. From Santo Domingo, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Ceremony at sea, the unique graduation still ahead on CBN's Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a graduation ceremony unlike any on land. A Michigan college student excited to graduate from Central Michigan University was also eager to jumpstart her career. Sophie Flaherty had to pick between a research opportunity in Antarctica or attending her graduation ceremony. She chose science, but her fellow scientists on board were busy formulating a plan to surprise her. With all hands on deck, Flaherty's crewmates coordinated with her classmates and faculty to put together a commencement ceremony on the ship. Donning her cap and gown, Flaherty accepted her diploma and special message from the university's president, bringing her to tears, the young scientist saying this was the most amazing experience. And congratulations to her. That's a great story and a unique one she'll be telling for many, many years to come. Thank you so much for joining us on Faith Nation. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday. Take care.